Hello, I'm Michael Bailey. Welcome to the preview on the Athletic FC. Today, we'll be focusing on the Manchester derby. With me today is our Manchester City writer, Sam Lee, our Manchester football writer, Mark Critchley, and tactics writer, Thom Harris. Well, I'll tell you what, Sam, Man City have won just one of the last 10 games. I'm sure you know. The most recent defeat being...
I've noticed, yeah.
Most recent being the 2-0 defeat at Juventus in the Champions League on Wednesday. This is obviously going to be the broad opening question, but what is going wrong for them?
Well, I'll try and be succinct, because yesterday I had a journalist from La Parisienne in France saying, can you send me a voice note on what's going on? And I started, and I was like, first of all, I hope you can understand how I speak. And second of all, sorry if it's 3 or 4 minutes. It was 11 and a half minutes. So basically, he was like, it can't just be Rodri, can it? I was like, no, it isn't. Like, obviously, Rodri's a massive miss, but then De Bruyne has been out for like 10 weeks. Foden is out at the moment. He's been out at the start of the season. He's been struggling with, different issues. So there's the creativity. The defence has just been like a rotating sushi conveyor belt of injuries. And then the ones who are fit have to play and play and play. And they either get worse or get injured. Like Kyle Walker's struggling horrifically. Akanji and Ake have been out and back in and back out again. But I think even without Rodri, they're just a bit physically lacking in midfield, not too fast, not too strong. So then that creates opportunities for more counterattacks. And then, Kovacic, who's not the perfect replacement for Rodri, but he's out as well. So then the midfield's even weaker. Gundogan plays all the time. He doesn't seem to have the legs for it. Bernardo's playing all the time, not playing well. Rico Lewis is playing all the time, not playing well. And again, he's not too strong. It's not like he can never be strong or physical, but he can get pushed off the ball quite easily. We've seen that quite a bit. And then that leaves the defence exposed. And the defence, there's hardly anybody fit. And also, there's a little side helping of the wingers don't score goals. And Haaland has been playing a lot and is a bit rusty as well. So they concede goals very easily and they don't score many. So it's a bit of a lethal combination.
Isn't it just? Tom, does that tie in with what you've seen tactically from them this season?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people like to roll their eyes at the kind of Rodri excuse, I think, but I think kind of the higher you go up in the Premier League, with teams like Arsenal and City, like when you lose a player like Rodri, like Martin Odegaard, like Arsenal did earlier in the season, it does have an impact because your ceiling drops. You're being dragged into these games, in the Premier League where variance can take control, where you can kind of, where in the past where City can just kind of click into a higher gear and kind of sail through these games, they're now having to win them and having to really fight for them. And I think that's where things like mistakes creep in. I think City have already committed more errors leading to shots this season than they have in 4 of the last 5 seasons, which is amazing because they're only halfway through. Yeah, it's a massive kind of domino effect. And I think with Rodri, like you say, he's so good at keeping the ball, retaining it, so therefore not giving the ball away in midfield and inviting these counter-attacks. He's also very good when City are able to be broken. He's good at being in the right place. He's very physically dominant. He wins his aerial duels a lot more than Gundogan and Bernardo Silva and Rico Lewis do in the middle. He knows how to make those smart fouls as well and just snuff these attacks out before they happen. And, with City at the moment, they're playing such a high line as well. So that's really easily exploited when they don't win those midfield battles. Yeah, there's just a lot of things going wrong at the same time. And I think the injury point is a big one because, I think City looked quite good against Nottingham Forest a couple of weeks ago when Grealish came into the middle. We had Josko Gvardiol coming into the middle as well. And then at Palace the following weekend, everything was reset because Grealish had to be rested. Gvardiol had to come back into centre-back because we didn't have 4 defenders. It's things that, like, even when Pep wants to try and be experimental, he can't really do it to the full extent that he normally does because there is just this kind of, as Sam put very eloquently, this sushi kind of sushi board of injuries.
And slightly disjointed up front. I mean, there was a moment against Juventus where I think Jeremy Doku got to the byline and Erling Haaland made a sort of a horizontal run to the near post and the cross actually went across the 6-yard box. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, it feels strange for me to see a couple of Manchester City forwards almost do different things where there's normally they feel quite rehearsed in knowing exactly what they're doing. Mark, let's flick it over to Manchester United. They just about got past Victoria Pilsen last night, winning 2-1, thanks to Rasmus Højlund's brace. Is that a step in the right direction for them?
think it's a baby step in the right direction. Let's put it like that, right? No, look, if it hadn't been for that very late Højlund winner, I think the reaction to that game and that performance would have been quite different, really. And look, yeah, maybe that's a little bit unfair. Maybe it's a little bit results based, but the first hour was pretty terrible. In fact, the first half was turgid, to be honest, and was being rated as probably one of the worst performances of the season, never mind just under Amorim. So, look, but I think what you saw last night was that once he made changes, once he brought on Højlund, once he brought on Mason Mount, who I thought made an impact, once he brought on even Anthony, he was getting the tune out of Anthony for that last half hour there. You had that sort of proactive approach from the touchline that, to be honest, a lot of the time wasn't really there under Erik ten Hag, and that's sort of the difference, really, is what United have bought into from Amorim. And you've seen that side of his management approach in his short spell so far, that he's been able to make these in-game tweaks that have often, improved United's performances. And so I thought after, the defeats against Arsenal and Forest, it was really important not to go on a streak of 3 games without a win, and to put a team who I think they were 10 points off the top of the Czech First League. So, that's when you're up against those sort of opponents, especially as a club like United, you need to be seen to be winning these games, even if we all accept that they're in a very transitional moment at the moment, right? So an important win means that they're probably not going to have to go through the ignominy of failing to qualify from this Europa League group stage phase, but we remains to be seen whether they get automatic. But yeah, a baby step in the right direction is how I would put it.
I hope I've got this right, but I think while it was going to be a draw, I think Amorim's start was looking like a 2-win, 2-draw, 2-defeat opening for him. I hope that's right. And I guess, Tom, Ruben Amorim would have come in hoping for a better start than he's managed. But are you sort of starting to see the things he's trying to implement on the pitch with this team?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously his Sporting Lisbon team, he's with them for 3, 4, 5 years, and he was able to get that consistency. He was able to recruit properly for the positions that he wants to play. I think there are a few square pegs and round holes at the moment with, I think the wing backs is a big one. I think you see, wing backs on their opposite foot on the opposite flank, and I think that kind of makes it a little bit harder for them to build up quickly and to get into those attacking areas. But I think the main thing is that they have kind of, towards the end, especially under Ten Hag, there was a lot of space in the midfield. They were easy to play through. They were, getting hit on the break a lot. And I think this new shape under Amorim, the back 5, does help to solidify that a little bit. I like it when Mason Mount plays in a front 3. I think he presses really well from the front. So yeah, I think there's just things to be built upon. But I think, as Amorim himself has said, he needs time. He needs time to work out the players, and he needs time to probably recruit players to play his system, I think.
Sam, has anyone recently asked you for positives about the situation at Man City recently? Like, if I was to ask you to give us some, is there anything going right at the moment for them?
Yeah, they haven't given up. Like, they keep going back to the well. They keep doing what they're supposed to do. And like, the other thing about these problems are, when they lost the 4 games in a row leading up to the November international break, it was like, okay, that was a bit weird. Come back after the international break, get the players back, it should be better. Obviously, the players who they were expecting to get back, like Stones, Ake, Akanji, they've gone out again. Kovacic, who they didn't know would be injured at all. But then it starts to spiral a bit. The Spurs pick them off 4-0. The Feyenoord was the worst one, even though that's one where they've got a point. Feyenoord was the worst one, because to be 3-0 up with 10, 15 minutes to go and then draw 3-3, that was the biggest blow. That was when you start to look around and think, what is going on? And then they go to Liverpool, they play well in parts, basically just in the sense that they were surviving, they were showing a bit of character. And then, like Tom mentioned, that Forest game feels like a long time ago, but it was last Wednesday. They started so well. I don't just mean the goal, but they turned up, they were pressing, there was the energy there. And you just think, how often can they keep, Guardiola keeps telling them, this is what we need to do, this is how you need to run, this is how you need to fight. And they keep doing it. And they know it's not enough. They know it's probably not going to be enough. At half-time the other night against Juve, when it was 0-0, nothing really happened. Haaland had a good chance and missed it. You think, well, they're surviving because they know the weaknesses in the team, but at least they're kind of doing what they need to do. We know it's not good enough, but the fight is there. It's not a situation where like Guardiola's lost the dressing room. They're all in it together, trying to get out of it. Now, I don't think they're going to get out of it anytime soon. Maybe they beat United. They got Villa away next. And, the games between Christmas and around New Year are okay. But then in January, if they've still got these weaknesses, they've got a horrible fixture list. And these are like factual issues. Like the team isn't good enough, even with its quality players, to get through these matches because they're just so weak on counter-attacks. And that there's no defence there to even save the day. But at least they're still fighting. You'd almost say it's the bare minimum, but to be fair, it would be quite easy after these 10 games just to kind of lose hope. But I don't think they have.
But that's interesting in itself that the players are obviously still listening to what Pep is telling them to do and showing that they can do that. How have you found?
And they play well in patches. Sorry,
exactly.
It's not enough, and I'm not saying it's enough, and they know it's not enough. But like the first half against Sporting Lisbon, they were really good. First half against Brighton, they were really good. 10 minutes against Spurs, but at least they're starting games with that intention. They're doing what they have to do, but it's just not enough because they're so weak. But there were periods where they are playing well. Even at Palace, they go down after 4 minutes, and it wasn't a great performance overall, but it wasn't anywhere near as kind of leaky as the ones that have gone before that, or even the Juve one. Like the fight is still there, and they do still do what they're supposed to do. But like I say, it just isn't enough.
So that leads me to think, though, what have your interactions with Pep Guardiola been like over the course of this season, and how that has that changed? We obviously see what comes out externally and the press conferences and the like.
People are saying stuff about Guardiola as if it's new and it's as a result of City not playing well and he's showing the strain and stuff. But it's like, well, people have always thought he was weird in terms of what he says and does. So if he's doing that now, is that because he's losing, or is it just because that's kind of how he is and some of the stuff he says? I don't know. I feel like he's obviously realistic about the situation. I think it's just the same as always, but like, what's different? Well, the questions are obviously a lot more negative, and I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just a reality. You have to say, you can't go in, oh, you're doing well, aren't you? Because they're not. So the answers are more negative. But when I say the team keep doing what they're doing, and they're still, it's not like Guardiola's lost the dressing room. Guardiola's like, okay, the thing he keeps saying is like, when you win, and one of the secrets to their success, although there's probably about 100, well, people might have another number actually, knowing what the comments are like on all my articles, but
it's close to 100.
Yeah. You round it up. One of the secrets to the success, the actual real secrets, not the childish stuff, is that Guardiola's always said, like, if you're winning, don't get too high, don't get too carried away. Like, you got to kind of stay on this even keel. And obviously now it's harder for the players because whatever they try isn't working. But he's got the same approach. You go in every day, you try and find the solutions in the same way. I said earlier, he hasn't really changed too much. He'd always be stressed about matches, even when City are winning. Like, they won 24 games in a row once, but he'd still be stressed about the next opponent, how to beat them. So he's kind of got that same approach. But yeah, I mean, look, one of the things we know about him from like 10 years ago, from that Marty Perrinal book when he was at Bayern Munich, he doesn't eat on match days because he's too nervous. And like, we know that he kind of, can get down on his haunches when he's stressed during a counter-attack. He can scratch his head. So was he scratching his head during that Feyenoord collapse? Of course he was. Like, because this is what he's always like. So the results are obviously bringing that out of him slightly, but I don't think he's like changed in any way. And the reason he signed the contract on the back of those 4 defeats, he was like, well, I feel like I need to stay and get the team back to the top. Things have got worse for now, but he's not going to be any less inclined to stay. He's going to be more like, it's almost like the worse it gets, the more determined he'll be to fix it.
And Tom, do you see Pep trying to work through solutions in getting around these issues that he's got at Manchester City? Is it making sense to you, or is it looking quite difficult to predict and seeing that things aren't working that he's trying?
Yeah, I think he's working with what he's got. To Sam's point, I think that Palace game was, it was an enforced change back to a system that wasn't working, and he just had to kind of hope that the attacking players dug them out of it, and they nearly did. That Haaland goal, to be honest, came out of nowhere, and I think City could have gone and won the game if it wasn't for another defensive lapse at the other end. But yeah, I'd broadly agree with Sam in saying that it's. Yeah, I think Pep has realised what he can and can't control, and things that he can't control, like the mistakes, like the injuries, like the press conference he's got to go. He's got to answer these questions, 4, 5, 6 times a week. You just got to keep going and got to keep working at it. And the quality of the players in there. I think there were a few good spells in that Juventus game. I thought the first half was quite dull, to be honest, but I thought that was good from a City perspective because they controlled the game really well, and they did have that chance for Erling Haaland. They probably could have gone 1-up, and it might have been a different game. But yeah, I think you've just got to keep going. And like you say, this game on the weekend, it really depends who's fit, because if Manu Akanji is out, if John Stones is still out, we know Nathan Ake is still out, then it probably will just have to be the same kind of system that we've seen in the last couple of weeks.
Just one thing, just briefly and a bit broadly on City and Pep. I think that if you were going to, it's an obvious point to make and people make it a lot, but if you were going to have one manager who was going to figure out a way of getting out of this situation, then it absolutely would be him, right? We always say this, that whatever issues crop up during a season for City, they usually fall away to the sidelines eventually because Pep comes up with some method or some way of addressing a problem tactically. I think what's striking and what's interesting is that, and I don't know if Sam would agree, but I think there's been a lot of focus on City ever since basically the Bournemouth game and that run of defeats, but I think there was certainly signs that performances and results like this were going to come at some point along the line, even before that, a couple of months before that, perhaps even while Rodri was still in the team to an extent, although he missed the start of the season as well. It's interesting that Pep hasn't yet come across that formula, come across that method, because we always expect that he eventually will. And I think that is the one reason why the expectations for this season have just got to be tempered a little bit. Perhaps I don't think when City were in this losing run, nobody thought that this was just going to continue. They're obviously going to improve. Players are going to come back. Even if Rodri doesn't, things will get better. It's just, is it going to be the City of the standard that we expect and that we've come to expect over the last few seasons? Probably not, right?
I think the reason they haven't found that solution, or because it's like the kind of father-in-law chat, isn't it? Like, oh, what's going on with City kind of thing. Like, oh, you'd think they'll be fine by now. It's like, well, do you really want me to do the 11-minute voice note thing, or do you want me to just go, oh, well, Rodri's injured, and shrug my shoulders? But the solutions are the problems. What does Guardiola like to do when he's got a doubt with the team, or how does he want to control a match Anfield away, for example, or anywhere with a big crowd like Copenhagen last season? Loads of passes, more passes than ever, more people in the middle to last year when Rodri was injured, and I mean last season when they went to Arsenal, to put Kovacic, Lewis, Stones, everyone in the middle, just gum up the game. So they put bodies in the middle. They want more passes. So who are the bodies going in the middle? Okay, well, move up Gvardiol or Walker, and then who are the guys giving the passes? Gundogan. Well, Gundogan started the last 6 games, and he's patently knackered. They're losing the ball, and then Kyle Walker hasn't got the pace to get back now, or Gvardiol's too high. So those solutions are only causing more problems, because the Guardiola playbook almost doesn't apply at the moment, because it's almost what I was saying earlier. They're doing what they need to do. They've still got the fight, but they know it's not good enough. And we know Guardiola's not stupid, because we always call him a genius. He knows exactly what his team's limitations are. And I think that's why after the game at Anfield, he was like, you might call me delusional, but I saw something here that we can build from. But unfortunately, in the Forest game, the next game, when they look pretty decent, very 7, 8 out of 10 City, Akanji and Ake got injured again, and then it all gets reset. So that's the problem again, because at least if you're giving the ball away in midfield, if you've got Ake back there or Akanji, you're probably going to win the tackle, so it's okay. But yeah, the solutions are the problems, and that's why it's a bit of a never-ending circle, as well as that rotating cast of injuries.
I mean, we can file Pep Guardiola under the gnarly, been around the block a few times in English football category now, of course, Mark. But I mean, Ruben Amorim, he's the fresh-faced newbie on the block. And how do you feel he's handled the job he's had at the start here at United? Because to be honest, every time things seem to cut to him in the dugout, he looks pretty angry and frustrated.
Yeah. Fresh-faced Sam Lee lookalike, isn't it?
Yeah, very fresh at the minute. If you're watching this video, you won't think so.
I'll let YouTube decide about that one. But no. Look, I think that you can see why United's kind of key decision makers were so taken by him. I think he's shown himself to be charismatic. I think he's shown himself to be a clear communicator, somebody who's able to convey key messages to players. I think that was one thing that was often levelled at Erik Ten Hag's door, that he didn't quite build that relationship with the squad. He just has a certain aura about him, Amorim, to be totally honest, being in a room with him. And it's a tough one for journalists, because you'll ask him a question, he'll smile and, give you a detailed enough answer, or certainly a long enough answer, and then you look back at it and you're like, well, he hasn't actually given away much there at all, but I've kind of enjoyed the experience because he smiled and like listened to my question. So he definitely knows how to play that side of the club. I think he has been a little bit taken aback by the scale of the job, if you like. There was those comments he was kind of making after his first game at Ipswich about just how much media he was having to do, and I think it's dawned on him that this job is really not just about coaching the players. In fact, that's almost just one of the, it's a long way down the list, really. Yes, you have to do that, but you have to be a figurehead, you have to be a spokesperson, you have to address all the many various things that go on at Manchester United on a weekly basis. You have to be front and centre of all of that. And I think that's perhaps taking him aback a little bit. But what I think I've been really impressed with him is that he has come into the job and been very realistic about what it's going to entail and just how long things are going to take to improve, basically. Even after the wins that he's had, the Bodo Glimt win, the Everton win, those were his second and third games. It's very easy for fans and media and the whole sort of ecosystem around United to get swept up in a new manager winning games. He's come in and he said, well, the performance wasn't all there. I want to see improvements. We've only got through on decisive moments. And he's been that sober analysis has been there all the way through. And I think that's really important. Rather than talking up players, rather than talking up the team, rather than saying, yeah, everything's going great and we're adapting to the methods quickly, he knows just how much of a gear shift this is going to be for the players, for the squad. And he's tried to feed that in and drop that in. And I think that's going to be critical because, this is now a bit of as a season, it's a bit of a write-off, really. Not totally, qualifying for the Champions League, maybe perhaps through winning the Europa League would be a huge achievement, right? And something to aim for. But the way that it's gone about, the decision to stick with Ten Hag at the end of last season, the delay in the end of making a change, and everything that's just gone on this past week with Dan Ashworth as well, it really has impacted on the season itself and means that everybody just needs to take a step back, take a deep breath, and let United almost adapt. That's very difficult at a club of this size and with this kind of scrutiny on it, but he's been keen to get that message across, and I think it's an important message that the club and even we as journalists probably need to move forward with for the rest of the season.
There's an interesting subplot, I suppose, here, Tom, in that Amorim's sporting side beat Man City for winning the Champions League earlier this season. United fans will hope that means that he knows exactly what the blueprint is for the derby, but it's not going to work like that, is it?
No, I think it gives us some clues as to how the two teams will set up. I don't think it gives us any clues as to how the game will go. I think when you watch that Sporting City game, City started really well. Again, as Sam mentioned, they are starting quite well in some of these games. And I think what we're going to see is that Amorim's defensive system with the 5 across the back, the 2 kind of holding midfielders, and then the 3 pushing from the front, matches up against how City look to build up with 3 defenders, 2 midfielders, and then 5 across the front. So it does kind of become a game of individual battles, and for City, I think, who will be controlling most of the ball, it will be how can you move around this setup, how can you kind of create those advantages. Are you looking for Kevin De Bruyne to drift out wide, and are you looking for Bernardo Silva to drop deep? Are you looking, just how can they disrupt that stable state? And then for United, it's about winning in duels and counter-attacking, which is obviously the blueprint at the moment as to how to beat this City team. I think Ugarte in the middle will be a big one, I think, because if City do go into this game with, obviously Rico Lewis is suspended, but if there is Bernardo Silva, if there is Ilkay Gundogan in the middle, and Ugarte can snap about in the middle, win the ball, give it to Bruno Fernandes, who's really good at kind of being vertical, being direct, getting the ball over the top to someone like Højlund, who can play that kind of disruptive Gyökeres role, if you like, and just running behind. I think that'll probably be the United game plan, but yeah, it's that again, like we said before, that Sporting team has a lot of experience under Amorim. They knew exactly what they were doing. This United team is still kind of feeling their way into this new system. I think it will depend on those individual battles, and if the players can turn up and perform those roles as well as Amorim wants them to.
Let's carry on our roundtable discussion with this one. What would be a good season from here for these clubs? I mean, Mark, you've kind of basically said that Man United can bin off this season already, which I can imagine all supporters agreeing with you immediately.
Yeah, no, look, I think honestly, I do think that just the expectations have to be tempered, which is incredibly difficult. I don't want to repeat myself, but like, if they could get fifth, maybe, and if fifth was enough for Champions League, or if they could have a serious run in the Europa League, I think people would look back on that and think, look, that's a success from a tangible material kind of trophy cabinet sort of success, right? But actually, is that how United want to judge success at the minute? Because we've just had 2 years of that, right? We've just had a manager who pretty much everybody knew in the wider context of things was underachieving and wasn't getting a tune out of the squad and wasn't building a sustainable team that would achieve success in the future. We've had him coming into press conferences every week and saying, look, I've won 2 trophies and only Pep's won more over the last few years. And people could see through the flaws in that argument. And I think Ten Hag had to make it a lot of the time, right? And it was his strongest card that he had to play in some respects to defend himself against the scrutiny, against the criticism he was getting. But I think people understand now that probably isn't the way to solely judge progress as a football club of United's level, or any kind of top 6 Premier League team, right? So I think those, just expectations just need to be reset a little bit. And whether they get Champions League or not, or whether they win the Europa League or not, if at the end of the season you can see that this is Ruben Amorim's team and that they're moving towards his style, his system, and his adapting to his way of playing and his principles, then I think that is just as much of a success as probably any trophy. I kind of want to say that. I don't know. That sounds about right to me, though. It sounds about right. And for City, I mean, look, I think that is again it's a question of where do your expectations lie after this? Because as I kind of referenced before, I think in the depths of this run, we all knew that they were going to improve. But are they going to improve enough to win the title? And that's been the standard. That has been what they've done for 5 out of the last 6 seasons or whatever, right? So are they going to be good enough to do that? I looking at this team at the minute without Rodri, and I know it's not as simple as Rodri, but I do think that is almost the straw that breaks the camel's back, or the little domino effect that sets everything else off. If he's not going to come back before the end of the season, as we don't really expect him to, at least in any good time, at least before the end of the season, then I think it is about just consolidating. It's about top 4. It's about making sure that you're in a position come the summer to do the rebuild that just about everybody accepts is necessary. And so for that perspective, I think from here on out, if City achieved that, then you'd look back and you say, box that one off, and we go again next year.
Yeah, I would like to ask you the same question, Sam, about City and what is a good season from here. But I mean, just to build off what Marcus said as well, I mean, I looked at Man City in the summer and saw Julian Alvarez leaving, and a bit of work in the summer, but not a lot. And I guess I kind of thought that maybe they looked a little bit weaker than they were the previous season. I don't know if that was a misconception on my part, but whether like the summer had any sort of bearing in how this season has played out. And then what are they trying to achieve come the end of it now?
I think they thought going into the season, I don't know if you'd say they took a gamble, but I think they decided, okay, we're not going to do the major business this summer, we'll do it next summer. As long as we don't get loads of injuries, we'll be all right. And obviously they did. But obviously they didn't expect to get Gundogan back. But when they did, they were like, okay, well, don't need a striker then, because he can play false 9, or Foden can play false 9, and Gundogan can fill in midfield or whatever. We've got all these options with Gundogan that we can do, and then he just has to play holding midfielder again and again and again. It's like some kind of damned to eternity thing. Like, just play holding midfield. Just play a role you can't do anymore because you've your legs repeatedly while everything crumbles around you kind of scenario. So yeah, it hasn't panned out how anybody expected. They maybe thought, look, Pep always finds solutions, and Pep didn't want them to sign Kyogo, the striker that they'd lined up from Celtic, because he was like, well, we don't need too many bodies, because he always likes to have a small squad. And then the injuries have obviously caused a problem, but it is a crazy injury situation, to be fair. In terms of how things look from now. I mean, at the moment, it feels like it's going to be like a Chelsea season of the last couple of seasons, when they're just like 10th or 12th or something. But they're still 4th. But not so much that, because right now, do I see them beating United and Villa? No, I'd say definitely not. I don't know what's going to happen on Sunday. I'd be very pessimistic about next weekend at Villa. But you don't have to be particularly good to get 4th place historically. There's always this race for fourth place, in like March, April, May, and teams are dropping points all over the place. If City can kind of get into a position even by February where they've stabilised, I think they'll get in the Champions League. And look, at the moment, they're still 4th now. They got Forest below them and Villa below them. Forest obviously had a good run, which has petered out slightly. Villa have been struggling a bit. And then below that, it's Brighton and Bournemouth, which, to be fair, is only like 3 points behind City. And yeah, they could cause problems, and Brentford as well, but I don't think those teams have, well, Brighton have, but I don't think those teams have ever showed that consistency to push for like 4th. 4th for those teams, you need to be perfect. Like, we've seen United get in the Champions League before in like comical seasons, because they'll win matches where no one's really paying attention. They win and you don't pay, and you go, okay, fine. But like Brighton, Bournemouth, Brentford, those teams, Fulham, they've got to be perfect. They've got to win all the time. So I think City, as long as they just stabilise, they'll have enough for 4th or 5th, because that's not an especially high bar. You don't have to be like City's quality of the last few years to get 4th. You can do it with considerably less, and at the moment they have got considerably less. So like I say, as long as they stabilise, possibly buy some players in January, and the noise is coming out of City is that they're definitely ready to buy some players. I think they'll be fine. Top 4 and then go again next season.
Tom, this is a bit rock and hard place, but which team do you think is on the best trajectory going into this derby? And I guess that can be the sort of less steepest decline.
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I think I would say City, just because of the continuity that they've had over the last 9 years now under Guardiola. That they can click into gear. We've not seen that Amorim's United can do that just yet. But as we've been speaking about for the last 35 minutes, that there are problems here. And the kind of good stuff that City can do is often at the moment undermined by the defensive foundations, which United will look to attack on the weekend. So yeah, I'd say City just for the history of the recent history of the two teams. But yeah, I think this derby on the weekend really interesting, and I think I come from a family of Man City fans. I've been speaking to them. My uncle's been going for 34 years, and he said he's actually kind of enjoying it weirdly at the moment. It's a bit different. You don't know what you're gonna get. Obviously City have been so dominant over the last 10 years, and it's just been an amazing kind of roller coaster. But there is that bit of jeopardy now. Obviously that he doesn't want to lose to United on the weekend, but there is this kind of feeling that it could go either way, and it's something different.
The idea of reliving 1990s Manchester City. Yeah, I'm all over that. Sam and Mark, I'll come to you too. I mean, what does this game mean, do you feel, for these two clubs? Where we are? I mean, you look at the recent games, obviously Man City have had the better of it in the Premier League. Obviously United won the FA Cup final. They both met in the Charity Shield. There's been a lot going on recently. So, Mark, do you want to go first? I mean, what is this game? To give us a quick brief in terms of what it's going to mean to the City.
To the city of Manchester, or Manchester
well,
City.
everyone. It's all encompassing question. The world. Give me the passion. I want to tap my chest while you're talking.
Do you know what? I think it feels. Look, this isn't going to get you tapping your chest. I think it feels less important to an extent in the grander scheme of things than it has done for the past few years. I mean, just for the fact that normally this game would be happening at a point where City are at least in some sort of title race, right? And so there was some kind of import on it there. You'd be going into games where if City weren't in a title race, then the United manager was usually fighting for his job, and so there'd be that element of jeopardy on the other side as well. And I get the feeling like, okay, so it's only December, but I sort of feel like neither of those things sort of apply at the moment, right? So in that respect, it means a little less from the grander picture, but I think both clubs are kind of looking for a departure point from what they've been going through over the last few weeks, or this season at least, right? And a derby win can do that. Particularly, there's a lot. I've been really struck by the amount of trepidation that there is among City fans over this game. And I understand it completely watching the team just because of how porous and how vulnerable they've looked, right? So it makes total sense. And there's that kind of the scar tissue, if you like, of previous games against United where they know that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's United teams would have approached this game in a way that would have been perfect for hitting at City's vulnerabilities as they presently are. And so there's that kind of fear factor going in for a lot of City fans. To overcome that and then use that as a catalyst for the rest of the season, I think, could be huge for them. But equally for United, I mean, if it was Amorim's first big win, not only in a derby but against a top Premier League club, then that equally could be a huge catalyst for the rest of their season as well. So, but I think it means more to the individual clubs, if you like, on either side than it does in the grander picture of things than derbies that we've had recently.
Well, I remember saying this before the Liverpool game, and I'll say it again now. If City were to win on Sunday, it would obviously be a massive result, and it would mean a lot on the day. But we're past the point of one result being enough to turn things around. They can't just beat United and everything's going to be fixed. They've still got all the injuries. They've still got the lack of physicality and mobility in midfield and all the stuff we talked about. So it's big just in the sense of get some good vibes back. The good vibes aren't going to fix anything. They could go to Villa after that and still lose. But it would just help to change the atmosphere around the club, but also just give the fans something to cheer again. It's not a massive game for City in terms of what it all means in a bigger scheme of things, because what they need is players back and possibly some new ones in January or the summer. But in terms of the match itself, I don't need to explain how big a derby victory is for teams. And I won't talk about United. United have had derby victories, as we've explained, down the years. Their record's actually decent considering how big a gulf there is between the two teams and how big we imagine that gulf to be because of some of the nature of City's really commanding wins. But United have always picked up victories here and there, and it's never meant they've kicked on either. So on the day it's huge. Beyond that, not so much.
And on that note, let's wrap up with some predictions. Tom, I'll come to you first because you can have the analytical eye.
Yeah, I don't think you can analyse this game. Like you say, it just depends on so many factors. I've got a sneaky feeling City will kind of find some form, just get a 2-1, 3-1 kind of win. But yeah, that could very easily be undone by a counter-attack in the 30th minute, and then that's it. So we'll see.
Got very precise in the middle. I like that. Sam, you?
Honestly, no idea. When I went to Anfield, everyone was like, "Oh, this is interesting." I was like, "City are going to get schooled here. There's just no two ways about it." But I don't know on Sunday. I was certain before the Liverpool game there was no way they could get anything out of it, rightly or wrongly. Obviously, in the end, it went that way. But there's no way of actually knowing. With this, though, honestly, I don't know, because I expect City to have the same good bits and bad bits as before. But I don't know what United are going to do, and I don't know what is going to happen when you throw those two teams together. I suppose if I had to guess, I wouldn't be surprised if United won on the break in the way that they have done sometimes against City, even when City are at their best. Because for all the things I've just talked about, we all know City are struggling. And United, as much as they've lost 2 league games in a row, that's fairly normal for them, isn't it? And then they can get that motivation back and they can get a performance from somewhere. So I suppose if I had to guess, I'd go with a United win.
Okay, so Sam's going for a United win, but does sound more optimistic than the
I've honestly no idea. Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
That's a win in a way. Mark?
I agree with a lot of what Sam said there. I just feel that all week I've kind of been leaning towards City, despite myself, because I just feel that United are still trying to get everything in place, and still trying to work it out and still trying to adapt to exactly what Ruben Amorim's after. Even in the games, like I said before, when they've won, there's been elements of them not playing particularly well. And I feel that, while trying to adapt to that style and lead into some of the more counter-attacking tendencies that have traditionally helped them in this fixture, that could just be a bit too much to juggle. So I'm going 2-1 City is how I've had it all week, and I'm not moving from that just yet.
And with that, we are done for today's podcast. A big thank you to Sam, Mark and Tom. The Athletic FC will be back on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend and enjoy the football.
If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.